put working on the car off. I've enjoyed being lazy, but I suppose we need to get something going today. There's a lot of parts. A lot of it is vintage air. 1, 2, 3 boxes, rain gear, various gaskets, carburetor, because we ended up getting rid of the carburetor that was on it. We had a lot of issues tuning it, and despite reading instructions and doing research, it just wasn't tuning out to what we expected. So we read up on this. It had a lot of good reviews. We went ahead and ran with it, along with picking up a spare 283 from a guy down the road for literally nothing, I guess. We made a trade on something we weren't using, so it didn't cost anything, and it gave us this intake, which allowed us, you know, slightly different bolting pattern for this carburetor, and therefore a little better performance. We did get the plug put back in, or on, yesterday. Ended up cutting on the fuel line some, trying to get it ready to fit up here, but we busted our flaring tool last night, so yeah, just waiting to see about trying to get it busted off, timed and tuned, and see if it runs any better, because it ran like absolute ass in the past. But until then, I guess it's going to be a matter of pulling the heater core out and all of that, including some of the stuff that we put in, like the pocket for the glove box and such, because all that gets replaced with vintage air apparently. So yay for backtracking, but here goes nothing. I went ahead and removed the glove box liner and this. Now this was in a previous video as far as being installed. I didn't feel it too important really to cover taking out, but it gives you great access to everything back here. And the liner has to come out obviously, because with the vintage air unit, we get a new one anyway. There's different different spacing behind the dash. I will end up pulling the heater controls again and the gauge cluster again to get access to everything under the dash, because we're going to install the wiper system first. But for now, I just wanted to kind of cover what I was doing to get all of this out. Okay, so far I pulled out a bolt here. I believe this was a 1/2 inch. This was 7/16. There's a 7/16 underneath this. I went ahead and pulled out the bolts around the little motor here, and everything seems pretty loose, so I'm going to kind of lightly work at it, see if it comes out, and if so, then it's pretty simple to remove. Okay, so yeah, those few bolts, and give it a little tug and it comes right out of the mounting area under the dash. Now it's going to be a little tricky, it looks like, to work it out. This whole unit came apart from this section over here. As you can see, there's a boot back here that looks like someone's put some electrical tape on before, which is no big deal. There's some sort of a seal there. I'm not sure what that's for, but yeah, now it's a matter of trying to work it out of the dash. And just like that, heater stuff's out. Surprisingly, all this stuff works pretty well. I have a buddy of mine that's building a 2-door, and I'm not sure if he's missing parts like this or not, but I don't need it anymore because we have vintage air. Now I guess it's going to be a matter of pulling the gauge cluster out. Pull the steering wheel off. Gonna remove this, gonna remove that, heater controls, and I guess the wiper knob, wiper assembly. Pull that, go from there, because by the end of all this is going to be a multiple part setup as far as filming. I guess we'll just see as we go, but here goes nothing. All right, gauge cluster's out. I wanted to go ahead and cover this because I had trouble with it. Now this is pretty simple, so it may have just been because I'm not the best at mechanicking, but in order to get this out, it comes with a new switch, so to speak. There's a set screw here, flathead, take that loose, and then this nut. Now I'm sure there's supposed to be a special tool to take this loose. I just used a flathead and lightly pecked at it with a hammer, and just like that, all of your old vacuum stuff is gone. If I can get it out of here. But yeah, that was pretty straightforward, but like I said, I wanted to go ahead and cover that while I was in here. So I'm not sure how the rain gear goes in. These seem pretty simplistic. They're just ran by cables down to the center mechanism here. But we'll take a look and see. Here's what we're looking at. I'm hoping this thing comes with some instructions. I know there's been a lot of guys on the Tri-Fi forums and on the Tri-Fi Facebook pages that I'm part of. I usually use the Facebook pages more. But a lot of these guys have done this conversion and say that it's not that bad. Said it takes about an hour for them, which means it's probably going to take about 3 or 4 for me. But that it's a tight fit. And that you may want to take your seat out for it, because you will be laying on your back some. Aside from the damn packing peanuts, this thing looks like an awesome kit. Please try our way first. I hear these guys have great tech support. Hopefully I don't have to use that, but no guarantees. So it looks like we have this main unit here, 2 arms, the switch. Is that everything? There's 16 miles of packing peanuts. They look like Cheetos, actually. Okay, yeah, so let's get some instructions out, do some reading, and then we'll jump on to the first steps. Before I get any farther, I did want to point this out because I was just bitching about the packing peanuts, and it says that they're biodegradable, naturally non-toxic, and non-static, so good on them for that. On this here, from what I've seen, it's just a matter of lightly working with this. Now, apparently there's a sprayer system that comes with a lot of these, but it's coming up to the screw on this. So, is that glass? That is glass. Where's that coming from? Now, like I said, I'm sure there's a tool that takes these off. Come on. There looks to be a setup for a sprayer, and I'm guessing it comes out of this little site here. I'll have to do some research, but apparently this car, to my knowledge, did not have this. So I'll point this out to my father, see if he wants to do something about this. But now it's a matter of trying to get all this out from under the dash, and that's going to be the fun part. So I'm going to have to do a little more reading, and then we'll try and limp through it. Apparently the same thing to remove these actual wiper shafts as it was the little garnish piece. There's 2 grooves here, and it's a matter of working them around, and then the shaft actually falls through the dash on the inside, so. I had to be quite careful with this coupling here because I might have lost the last one. Yeah, it was 4 times. Just like that. Fell into the inside to be removed. Now I just have to get the center section out, all of the wiper setups out and ready to start anew. Now, for this last part, I wanted to point something out. I went to try and pull this. I went to try and pull this thing out originally, and it was clocked a certain way, and it wouldn't come out. I don't know if that's because a cable was binding in here or what, but 2 screws on the very outside, as well as 2 screws that take the actual wiper motor off. And this thing pulls through, and I'm guessing that these pieces just pull through that hole as well, and that keeps everything intact. You've saved the entirety of your wiper system if you don't drop a shim in the cowling like I did and have to chase it out later. From here, it's a matter of reading and trying to very tediously fish everything back in and place it in the way it's supposed to go, because from the looks of it, it's going to be a terribly tight fit, as everyone on the Tri-Fi forums and Facebook pages have said, but we're going to work through it. All right, the first thing that the instructions mention after removing everything is that you've got these 2 3/8 diameter rods from the firewall fittings that support the steering column, blah, 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 blah. I got to take out the left-hand support rod. It will not be reinstalled. And then it's talking about actually getting the bracketry in the unit mounted up. It mentions bending the tab in figure 2, which is right here. It says you got to bend it about 30 degrees to where to sit flush with the firewall. We'll look more at that in a second. With the instructions saying to bend the tab, let me see if I can get a light in here. It's a very tight fit, first of all, so the guys on the forums were not lying in the slightest. We're exaggerating, but that's all right. There's a tab right here, yeah, right there, and it bolts up to where that left-hand bolt bracket, or left-handed rod bolted up right there. And they were right in the instructions. Obviously, they know what they're doing more than me. But with about a 30-degree bend, it sits flush. The thing to look forward to the most so far is moving all of the wiring out of the way, because this thing takes up a ton of room. The next step of the instructions say to go ahead and do your wiring for the switch. I have no idea why it wasn't sent originally. But they send some butt splices. I'm going to read ahead, make sure there's nothing that has to come back loose, and if not, go ahead and solder these together, heat shrink them, make them nice and neat, bundle them together, and move on to the next step. Okay, so at this point, the instructions say that you get this slid through the dash. From the outside of the car, place rubber washer, aluminum spacer, and the 5/8 by 24 nut on the pivot shaft, and run it up so it's snug but not tight. And I'm guessing this is to kind of get it mocked up where it needs to be. There's that. All right, so after this, it's saying secure the motor drive assembly against firewall using the bolt in the steering column support location, which is where we removed that rod from. Then I guess it says to come back and tighten the outside pivot shaft nut using a 3/4 inch deep socket. Okay, cool. Had to do a hard stop on everything because once I got the driver's side situated and kind of where I wanted it and snugged up, I got to looking, and I would have no room down here where my fuse panel would go. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time trying to figure out where I can mount it, get a few things wired up on it, and then I'll put the assembly back in and keep it going. Finally got the fuse block mounted somewhere pretty close to, I guess, what's going to be the best option I'll have. Pulled a few more things out from over this way. Got the vent out, the defrost vent, or duct work rather. Put this in, realized my wiring was in the wrong place. Pulled it out, moved my wiring around, put it back in. So I say that to say this: keep an eye on your wiring. Save yourself trouble. So the next step, as per the instructions, say to connect the links from driver to passenger side. Following the instructions, I've done just that with the hardware provided. It shows this little dovetail going to the passenger side here. My only concern is that I need to put in these push grommets. Install molded bushings. Now note that they go with the flange toward the pivot shaft and are a very tight fit. And this picture shows it toward the pivot shaft. So, considering this picture shows us pivot shaft to the back, I'm guessing it's going to go just like this. And they are a very tight fit. So I'll get those popped in and move on to the next step. So got this clip on. It was literally just self-explanatory with instructions. Use the 1/4 inch wrench as it said to put pressure here and apply it. Now it says to leave a 1/2 inch stop. I'm just ballparking it, to be honest. Place the left end of the link, which is over here, towards the drive unit, and pass the right hand pivot shaft through the right wiper cowl on a right wiper hole in the cowl. So snake this thing through. Thankfully there's nothing to block me. There's that. It's just kind of hanging. And now the instructions say to go on the outside, do the same as over here, put the rubber bushing, shim, nut, kind of hold it in place, snug, not tight. There we go, there's that. This job's pretty well done, I think. There's also a block off plate here that goes under the hood, and I have to do a little bit of dress up and paint work because obviously I painted around the original, but that keeps the hole covered, and then you don't have to worry about it on your firewall anymore. You don't have to worry about crappy vacuum powered wipers that don't work worth a damn. This is its final setting. It's very tight down here. I'll have to manipulate the wiring kind of to the right hand side of it. The switch is in. My factory deal, my factory knob was kind of stripped out, but I have hooked
These are the two wires that have to wire up ground and hot to the fuse box. But with those attached to a battery, this works excellently. That works. The sprayer function, even though I don't have a motor, it still kicks them on the cycle. And at first I forgot to tighten these up, which allowed the bracket to shift left and right, and allowed to get this out of allowed this to get out of like a clocked position. You know, it's only supposed to have half an inch or so in between the top tong and the bottom tong, and boy, it got out of whack. But yeah, everything's in. It functions quite well, actually. All of the underside of the dash is open and ready for me to start the vintage air unit. Also got the carburetor put on and finished up all of the fittings. I actually had to bend a line. This is all hand bent with a tubing bender and double flare tool and all that good stuff, and it runs pretty close. Still a little choppy, but far better than it was. I can actually, theoretically, I could drive it now. Got a good bit of progress done. This next off rotation, I'll try and tackle the vintage air and some more tuning and small things on the car in hopes of getting it closer to where it needs to be. But I got what I wanted done for the weekend. We got the rain gear put in and got it running. So till next time, thanks for watching.